and welcome to the Facilities Usage and Planning Subcommittee meeting. I am Joyce Asak, the chair of the committee, and we have Mr. Tim Sullivan present, and we have our attorney Peter Mello and our superintendent Mike Thomas, and we have Dr. Cobbs also present during our meeting. I'm going to read our COVID. So due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and state of emergency, on March 12, 2020, Governor Baker issued an executive order temporarily suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20. Pursuant to the order, public bodies are temporarily relieved from the open meeting law's requirement that meetings be held in public places, open and physically accessible to the public, so long as measures are taken to ensure public access to the body's deliberations through adequate alternative means. This meeting will be held and will be accessible to the public via Brockton Community Access, Brockton Public Schools website, www.bpsma.org, or YouTube and Comcast channel 12. And also the public can access this meeting via this link, youtube.com/TheBrocktonChannels. Welcome everybody to our meeting. I am going to go ahead and just take a roll call. Mr. Sullivan?
Here.
Okay, and I am here. And Mr. Minicello is unable to attend this evening. And the first thing on our agenda, we have the discussion of Eldon B. Keithfield, and if I can ask Attorney Mello to speak upon that for us.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Isaac. And I want to say this is the first time I've appeared for the subcommittee or the school committee for that matter. So I just want to first say that it's a pleasure to meet with you all, and it's an honor to serve the schools. And I think it's appropriate for the subcommittee to check in on this, and I'm obviously happy to address any questions, of course, but I'm compelled to sort of preface that with the disclaimer that the details of this concept and any potential disposition remain the subject of internal vetting. The lawyers, including myself, are working through certain legal and procedural questions and the like. And given the fluidity of some of those items, it's probably, I think, premature to delve unduly into the particulars of all that. And, being mindful of the prospect that, there could be a potential disposition process and any procedures associated with that and the like. So, but I do think fundamentally it's appropriate for the committee or for the subcommittee to consider, as a initial matter, whether it's amenable to the concept of relinquishing control over a portion of the Keithfield property, over any portion of it. So I think to that end, it would be, appropriate to have that discussion. And I guess with that, I'm happy to address any questions, but I would just open it up to the subcommittee to discuss.
Okay. Welcome, Mr. D'Agostino. Welcome, Mr. D'Agostino. All right. Anyone have any questions that you would like to ask Attorney Mello? I know there's been talk about different things going on. We're right now in the preparation stages, correct? We're trying to gather info and see what the next steps are between ourselves and the council.
Right, exactly. I mean, sort of fundamentally, there's this concept of potentially making available for disposition a portion of the Keithfields property. And if that were done, then that disposition would be the subject of an RFP process. I know that there were materials in the packet that was distributed that pertain to the Boys and Girls Club, certainly they're one of one entity that could potentially bid on a disposition or on an RFP process if it was a subject of that. And the other entities also would have the opportunity to bid. But I think, as I said, the concepts being, remains a subject of a vetting process, and the lawyers are looking into different legal and procedural questions. But I think it is appropriate for the subcommittee just to explore the concept itself, whether the subcommittee would be amenable to an arrangement whereby, a portion of the Keith Field land would be disposed or, conveyed to a different party.
Many people don't know the story behind the Keith Field, and many don't know the story behind the Keith Field as to why we would be involved. As Eldon B. Keith had served on the school committee many years ago. And that's why some people wondered why we had the involvement. Why is it not just, the city working on this?
I'm sorry, Joyce, could I just interject for a second? Is the live stream still going on?
It says live in the upper left-hand corner.
Okay. I wasn't sure. I just got
I got an alert, something about the host, but I believe the live stream, I still see it on in the upper left-hand.
Okay.
Perfect.
Attorney Mello and Ms. Azek, I just spoke with Mike Simmons. A particular computer has disengaged and they actually have another one up and running. I did confirm that.
Okay.
I was going to say that BCA is gone. I don't see BCA on here.
Yep, they're switching it over.
Okay,
Yep,
that's what happened. Okay.
Thank you.
So are we all set? Okay, it looks like we're all set. I just heard that we're probably linked back in. So I forgot where we were. I
had just mentioned that I think it's appropriate for the subcommittee to discuss the concept generally of whether it would be amenable to the idea of conveying a portion of the Keith Field property.
Okay. So right now we're just going back and forth with the city's council trying to gather more information, and then we should know something within a few weeks.
I think that's reasonable. The discussions they're sort of ongoing, and but I think that's a reasonable time frame.
Okay.
At least with respect to a lot of the, to certain of the issues.
Okay. Anyone have any
Could I ask
questions?
one question?
Sure, Mr. Sullivan.
Mr. Sullivan.
I'm on a little bit of a delay here with this computer. Attorney Mello,
How you doing?
we had talked, myself and the chair, about 2 weeks ago. And there was a little confusion on who actually has control of that property. Has that been settled? Or has anything been settled?
Yeah. So, again, I don't want to delve into all the particulars of the discussions. I think it would be premature. And, as I said, that being mindful of the prospect of a potential disposition process and the procedures and attorney-client privilege issues and the like. But yeah, I mean, the school has historically managed that property and controls it, and manages it. And I think that dates back decades. So I think that I think that much is readily understood by everyone involved. But there's a lot of procedural questions that that in any time you deal with a process like this, that you have to work through, and that's what we're trying to coordinate. But no, in terms of the control and the management, I think, and Mike and others can speak to this as well, the schools have always maintained that and managed it and controlled it.
So can we talk about what they're trying to do, or we just hold off on that for now?
Well, no, I think that generally speaking, the concept is that there's this proposal that that the city considered disposing of or conveying a portion of that Keith Fields property. And, I think that the question is the school committee amenable to that concept? And if so, to what extent? I mean, how much or of that property would the committee consider relinquishing control over? If at all.
I had talked with the chair.
Yeah.
I had talked with the chair about 2 weeks ago, and I guess there's a lot of historical benefits in that particular piece of property that we didn't want to lose.
If I can just step in, I had spoken with Mr. Sullivan, and after looking at some of the history of the park and the whole process as to the dedication and the person that park was dedicated in memory of, there is a concern that we just want to maintain any historical aspect, from the eagle entrance to just the stonework and the things like that. So I think once we get closer and we know what they're discussing specifically, we can just make sure that that's preserved. We're going back from, I think, 1920s. So it's going way back. But I know those were some of the concerns that we had, and also the size of the parcel. That was another concern. So Attorney Mello has been in communication with the other attorneys, and he's just trying to gather as much information as possible to get it back to us, so we have more of a picture as to what we need to address. But did that answer your question, Mr. Sullivan? I think so. We have a little bit of a delay. Tim, we're good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, we're all set. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. D'Agostino, any questions? Anyone have any input or any questions for Attorney Mello?
No questions. I mean, I think, and I know you guys had started this, and I apologize for being tardy. I was finishing a meeting here at the office. So, but I mean, I think we would need to, I think we need to find out if in concept the committee is amenable to go to considering it, and a portion of it. If I'm not mistaken, Peter, and you and I have talked a little bit, basically our issue is really maybe I'm wrong, but really a yay or nay vote on whether or not we need the piece of land in question or not. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's, I think, a fair, summary of the substance of a vote under General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 15A, which basically, and I'm paraphrasing, says when a certain public body manages property, or when publicly owned property is sort of vested in one body, controlled by one body, as the field is by the school committee in this case. In order to dispose of that property, or ultimately to convey it, or even to reappropriate it to a different municipal use, the body that controls it needs to take a vote essentially to relinquish control over it. And that's what would be, one of the votes that would be required in connection with, this potential process. So.
But what happens with it from there, if I understand right, really isn't a school committee issue. That's a council mayor's office thing. It's more of us saying we need it, we don't need it.
Yeah, basically, in general terms, that's what, that's the substance of a vote under 15A. It's the body saying we no longer need this area or a subset of the area for this purpose anymore. And we're, relinquishing our control over it. That vote has to then be approved by the city council, for example, different municipalities. It depends on the governance structure and whether municipalities, a city or a town and the like, how it's managed from there. But yeah, the initial vote would be by the public body that maintains control over the area in question, which in this case, obviously, is the school committee with respect to the Keith Field.
Right. Okay. All right.
If the property is relinquished, what do we get in return?
Well, so that's the question. I mean, if the city were to follow all the steps that it needs to ultimately, subject the process, the property to an RFP or a portion of the property to an RFP process and convey it, then what would happen is that parties that were interested in bidding on the property would submit proposals to the city, and the city would evaluate those proposals, and part of those proposals would be would include a monetary offer. So I guess the short answer to that is if it ultimately were the subject of an RFP process, what would be received in return would be money.
But the school committee wouldn't necessarily directly get anything, Tim, to your point. The schools aren't necessarily guaranteed anything. I mean, the city would get the money for the piece of land, and that may or may not come back to the schools.
Is that right, Attorney Mello?
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's completely up to the city?
Yeah, it's this. The school wouldn't directly receive anything from anyone following a vote under 15A, for example. If the city were to accept an offer, a monetary offer from a prospective bidder, and sell the land, that I think that would go under the general revenue, or it wouldn't. I don't think flow directly to the schools. I think Mr. D'Agostino is correct.
Can I just jump in? So, all right, so I'm a little confused because I thought anything that we did with this piece of land, any money was to come back to the school, the way that it was written.
I think what you may be referring to are the restrictions in the deed and in the special act that that if, for example, if there were admission fees charged for events at the field, that would accrue to the school. Is that what you're referring to?
No, they just everything the way that I read it and the way that I understood the special provisions that we had as a school committee was any financial benefit would come to the schools.
Right.
Unless I misunderstood it, but that's how I understood the deed, that we oversee this piece of land and it was to come to us. Any financial benefit from it is to come to us.
Right. But I think what Mr. Sullivan was asking is if it were conveyed. The property's conveyed, it's been relinquished. It's no longer in the school committee's control. This is an example of an issue that I could pin down, and look into and confirm if you like. But no, I think Mr. D'Agostino is right. It's once any portion of the property is relinquished by the school committee and becomes subject to or available for disposition and subject to conveyance by the city, whatever money the city would receive from a bidder, for the conveyance of that property would would be part of, again, I'd have to pin down exactly where that money would, which account it would need to be deposited into, but presumably it would be a city account and wouldn't accrue to the schools necessarily.
Really be up to the council if it did or did not, the council and the mayor by appropriation, right? That would just go through the normal appropriation process, I would imagine. If they wanted to send some of that to the schools, they certainly could by making the appropriation, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. And again, that's an issue that I can, confirm and get back to you on if you'd like, but that's my understanding.
Attorney Mello, could I ask one more thing?
Yeah, sure.
If we relinquish control of that piece of property, is that we lose all the control of the whole property? Am I understanding that?
Well, that gets back to the original question. No, you wouldn't need to. Under 15A, you can relinquish control over, an entire parcel or a portion of it. So I think the question is there any portion of that property that the school committee would be amenable to relinquishing its control over? But no, you wouldn't be required of necessity to. I mean, you could arrange the process so that only a portion of that property is available for disposition or the subject of an RFP.
And what about the historical pieces of the property? Could that be saved or moved?
Well, the school committee's not required to relinquish control over any of it. So yeah, I think if there's a portion of the property that you want to make sure remains within the school committee's control, I think that that's within your discretion. You could vote accordingly.
Mr. Sullivan, I mean, it's a large parcel, so I'm sure there'd be a way that they'd be able
Correct.
to carve that out and preserve that part of the historical part of West Elm Street. It's over on West Elm Street is the side that has the entrance with the Keith family memorial and the Eagles and all
The
that
Eagles.
work that was put into it back in the 20s. So we're talking about almost 5 acres of land that we really need to look into and just make sure that we don't, we just have to look into it a little further.
Attorney Mello, you need a motion tonight? Did I hear you right?
No. Or no motion or vote is necessary. I think the idea was to just update the subcommittee on the status of the review process and internally, and also open up the discussion and start the conversation among members of the subcommittee whether the subcommittee would be amenable to this concept. But no explicit vote or action is required at the moment.
So Peter, just so I can add what we want to protect as a school department, in my opinion, is the area where the kids and we use for soccer, football, the play area for the students that attend the unknown school. So it would be important for the school department to continue to keep control over that part of the parcel, which is obviously a large part of it. It's big enough for a football field and big enough for a regulation soccer field. So that would be, and when these discussions started early with the city back, I want to say it was back in April of the year before, it was, that was clear that, you know, we needed to keep control over the actual part of the parcel where the students, and we use to lease out, and some of our own sporting teams play there. So that was the interest of, you know, the athletic department, the facilities department, my office, and I've had these conversations with the school committee as well, and they think it's, you know, and I don't want to put words in their mouth, but how important it is for us to keep as much as that field as possible for obviously the playing surfaces that's used for by the students and sport athletic teams.
Definitely, that field is definitely used by many different sports. I mean, you have soccer. It's used for so many different things throughout the city. You know, different events and stuff. So it is important that we do try to hold on to as much of it as we can. But I mean, Attorney Mello is just coming to give us an update, get the discussion going, get some of the members on board, just so we know what's going on. As far as just an update. So, you know, they're in the middle of talks right now, and he'll just keep updating us as things come, you know, as things are progressing. Anyone else have anything, or are we good to move on to the next item? Everything good?
Good to move.
Good to move? Everyone's good? Thank you, Attorney Mello. We really appreciate it, and look forward to an update. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
My pleasure, Chair Asak. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Bye now.
Thank you. So item number 2 on the agenda, we have Huntington School roof replacement update. So is that going to be Dr. Cobbs, or is that going to be?
Yeah, the next 2 agenda items, Dr. Cobbs. Yep.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Cobbs. It's all yours.
Good evening. So as you can see, if you have your booklets, and I emailed you this as well, sorry it took we at the last minute. So as you know, the Huntington School roof project, we submitted the SOI back in February of 2019. So as is typical with the MSBA projects, it's kind of like a 2-year lead time process before we really kind of get going. So, you know, we're at the point where, you know, we submitted the SOI, and you can see from the chronology I sent to you, I won't go through every single piece of it. You know, it was accepted by the MSBA we were invited to participate. Then they approved the project back in June. The estimated, you know, right now the estimate to complete the project is about $2.9 million, $2,943,376 to be exact. Of that, you know, the portion that the MSBA will pay, is about almost 80%. So with that said, you know, they will pay about $2.3 million, and the city of Brockton will come up with about $700,000 for the project, just about 20%. So that's where we are. That's been approved. That's been signed off on. So we're at the point now where the project is going through the actual design and for the drawings, engineering drawings to go out, eventually to go out to bid once those are completed. So the project had to be extended a couple of times because we had to get on the docket for the city council to vote and get that through the voting process, and the mayor to sign it. So we asked for an extension back in October this year, which was granted by the MSBA. And then we, you know, we had to go through the district. This building, because it's in a historical district, had to be signed off by the Brockton Historical Society, which at this point in time, there is none. So we had to go through a whole process of trying to figure out what was going to happen next. And I guess the way it's written in the state law, if you don't have a city or municipal historical society, it defaults to the Massachusetts Historical Society. So they had to notify our project manager had to notify the Massachusetts Historical Society, and interesting enough, they do not correspond by email or any kind of electronic methodology. Everything is actually paper mail. So we had to send a letter to them, and it takes them a couple of weeks to turn around each time we have to communicate with them. And they did, and initially they kind of hit pause. They wanted to see, they asked questions about it and look at what we proposed as far as the construction methodologies. And eventually they signed off on it, but that held us back like another month, just about by snail mail back and forth. So we got through that process. The Massachusetts Historical Society, in the end, has no issues with the construction project and understands the need for the project. As you can see in your documents in Appendix B, I gave you pictures and a lot of the engineering drawings and really technical things about the whole project. So,
Dr. Cobbs,
yes, ma'am.
sorry to interrupt. Just
Certainly.
a quick question. Is it normal that the construction takes so long? Or is
Yeah.
it because it's a slate roof?
In a project like this, it's this construction actually will be the shortest part of the project. The process of getting it approved to MSBA and all the documentation and going out to bid and contractors getting signed on board. And so there's a whole, again, in the attachment B that I gave you, there's actually a schedule that is kind of a long, with all the arrows on it, that kind of shows you the whole process of from start to finish, from the MSBA SOI approval to
that's what I mean. I'd seen projected construction to begin and then completion was in July. So I just didn't know if it was a little longer due to the slate roof.
Well, that's part of it. The demolition it has to be carefully done, and it is a historical building in the area, so demolition has to be carefully done. And it's a lot of roofs. It's a lot of area for roofing. So it's not just, as you see, the typical project, kind of strip off the tiles and then kind of go back and replace. It's much more involved than that, where there's structural issues to consider. And certainly the weight of the slate roof will help the internal structural issues that we have. In fact, the engineers will be there tomorrow morning to look at if you look at some of the pictures, you can see inside the roof structure, we had to brace it, particularly Mike will tell you, back when we had all the snow capped on top of the roofs and the structure had to be braced. So removing all that slate will certainly help, because the end product will be a metal seam roof that replaces it. So it'll take a lot of weight off the load off of the structure of the building.
I believe Mr. DiAgostino and Mr. Sullivan toured the Huntington, or was it just myself and Mr. DiAgostino? But we saw that. It was pretty impressive the way they braced it. This was a few years ago,
right?
When we went up to the third floor. So
yeah, it's not really.
We're almost there. It's taking a little time, but we're almost there.
Yeah, exactly. But if you think again, like I said, if you look at the actual construction, the work begins in March and it ends, just 3 months later in July. That's pretty good. That's the shortest part of the whole project. But nevertheless, the whole bureaucratic process had to wind its way through. So that's where we are with that. Like I said,
Dr. Cobb.
Yes, sir.
What do you need do you need a motion to move this to the city council for their approval?
It's already been approved by the city
need?
council. I'm just giving you an update essentially on where we are with the project and
okay.
the projected time. It's been approved by, you guys have already voted on it, and the city council has voted to approve the appropriations and pretty much everything is signed off on at this point. Just it needs to go forward to the design and engineering phase and out to bid before we can award the contract to the next steps and get started.
One last question. I apologize.
Certainly.
If we are planning to go back to school eventually, fingers crossed, if everything goes well, is this going to interrupt anything as far as the way that the Huntington is running?
No, they should be able to access the building while the construction is going on.
Okay.
And because it may not start until the spring, who knows when we'll have to bring the students back to the building, but they'll work around.
Thank you so
It's
much.
actually such a small student population at the Huntington at this point, it shouldn't interfere with the student, the school operations at all.
Mr. DiAgostino?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to jump in. This is, and it always amazes me just how long sometimes the bureaucracy takes. The first conversation I had about doing this, I hadn't even been elected yet. I was running. And Dennis Ianieri and I had a conversation, and I had a conversation with then Principal June Saber McGuire about the condition of this building. And I can tell you that I've been up in that attic at this point 3 or 4 times over the last 6 or 7 years, and it ain't getting any sweeter with time.
No, you can see the pictures that it illustrates clearly.
Oh, yeah, and when the day we all went up there, when we initially submitted the SOA on this, you know, I hadn't been up there in about a year, and just in a year, it was worse. I can imagine that if we went up there again now, we'd see even further damage from the water issues and what have you. And so my main thing is I just want to thank you, Dr. Cobbs, and everybody else, the city council, the superintendent, everybody else who's been involved in getting this to move forward. I know it's been delayed and it's creeping forward, and people who work in the building are feverishly looking forward to this because, you know, hopefully it'll allow us to do some other work in the building that, you know, Mike, you and I've talked about this. We don't want to do any other repairs until we have the roof solid.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, so this is really a big step that will then give us some other opportunities to freshen the building up.
Exactly. We're getting there. Like you said, that's the exact words. We're creeping towards getting the contract bid and let out to get the work started. So,
Right.
2 more months.
And can you also refresh my memory, because, you know, there have been concerns in the past, not that this is even being, and I want to be clear for anybody watching, not that this is even being remotely discussed. Obviously, we don't put roofs on buildings if we're not planning to utilize them. But when you take SBA money, if you close that building, there is a consequence of that, correct?
Indeed.
I think you have to give it back, the money, right?
Yeah, we don't, Superintendent Thomas can speak to this, but I don't believe we're planning on closing that building anytime soon. We need all the space we can get, you know, and particularly if we come back in a hybrid model and have to figure out where to place students. That's, again, Superintendent Thomas can speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, that building has worked well, and the reason, again, once we get a new roof, it will be even better because we will, even though it's older, we'll do some more interior renovations. But the key was the move from the Goddard to the Huntington was we continued to get cited by the Department of Education having a therapeutic day school that did not have a gymnasium and more importantly, it did not have an elevator. The Huntington has both. So that has really been a big plus for the students that attend that school. We were not being cited anymore by the Department of Ed of not having an elevator or a gymnasium. So that's really helped the district, and obviously it's important, especially with a student, you know, with a therapeutic day school, that, you know, those students have the opportunities to be, you know, get throughout the building, have a gymnasium, and have other, you know, everything that, you know, a school has. So that was the importance of the move to the Huntington. So I don't think there's any way that we would ever close that within any time that I'm still around. I don't see that happening at all.
You and me both, and I know that that's always been a concern that folks in the neighborhood, and it's my wards, folks in the neighborhood have been concerned that it could get closed and have another abandoned building in the south end. And so beyond that, this project being done, not only because we need the building, right? We were getting cited, we had to make that change, but also we're taking $2.3 million from the state to put a roof on it. If we then don't keep it open, we could have to give back a big chunk of $2.3 million. So I guess what I was trying to do is anybody in the ward that might be watching, give them some additional, even further assurance. They do not need to worry about this building closing anytime that Mike or myself, you know, are certainly around, and, you know, because now there's a financial penalty for the city for that.
Yep.
Good point.
Well, doesn't it also allow us to grow the program once we have some of these renovations? I know originally when we had spoken about moving them over, just relocating over to the Huntington, that we were going to try to expand the program. Given the size of the building, you know, we can expand it, but it's just now that we're having the roof finally done, it's going to allow us to keep moving in that direction, I believe. That way
Absolutely.
we can meet some of these goals that we set. So that's perfect.
Yep.
Like I said, we've been on the committee for quite a few years, and it's been a little bit of a process to get this roof done. It's crazy how long it takes to get something done but it's definitely a long process. But
The light, you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. We're
Yeah.
good.
I want to thank
At least for the
everybody
roof anyway.
who's been involved in this, because this is, like I said, this has been on my to-do list since before I was actually elected. This has been on my to-do list of something that, you know, I wanted to see happen. And so thank you to everybody who's been a part of it, because it's been a long time coming. Thank you.
I do want to, if we can just move things along, there's another meeting this evening, correct, with Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Okay, because we're already,
That's at 7, I believe.
oh, 7? Oh, okay, I thought it was at 6.
Tim, right? We're not till, well, I think we got to be there a little early for 6:30, right?
I think it's 7 and 7:30.
Oh, is it
Okay.
7:30? Okay.
I just want to make sure we have
It
enough
is
time for
7
Dr.
o'clock now.
Cobbs to
At 7.
present his, finish with his presentation.
Sure. So is there any more questions on the Huntington? We're good. Very good. So,
No, great job.
thank you.
We're almost there.
We'll get in there. We really can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Like I said, it's only a few months from now, 8, 9 months, and it'll be done. So, the next, we already segued into this a little bit with the Goddard School project. What we're going to do at the Goddard is it's a renovation. It's not a remodeling. There's no major construction that's going to go on. So we have to understand that with a building that old, if you try to do, everything's based on a percentage of what you do as far as the dollar cost of doing any work in the building. If you see a certain dollar cost, like more than 80% of the building's value, then you have to bring it all the way up to code, which would include installing elevators and major renovations and upgrades and some of the fire alarm and plumbing systems and different things. So at this point, we're refreshing it. We're doing, things like replacing carpets and painting and ceiling tiles and light fixtures, making sure all the plumbing is functional. Like basically, the building it functions as it's supposed to. All the systems are in order. So the plan is to move the community center at North Middle School over to the Goddard School on the first floor only at this point. And again, it's only the first floor because it does not have an elevator. It does have an access ramp for handicap access, but it does not have an elevator. So the second floor will essentially be used for storage for us for the most part. We have records over there from some of the schools that we'll maintain. So the places, the building has been maintained, it's been heated and it's been a security system. And so we're just going to, again, do refreshing and install the necessary phones and technology and make sure the alarm systems are up to date. And that's the plan for the renovations for that building. The plan is to move we would move out of North Middle School probably the end of, we had planned the end of November, but we have a few of our staff, our construction workers that are out with COVID, so it's kind of put us back a little bit. So we're probably going to back up a couple of weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, to get out of the North Middle School and then move over to the Goddard building, which we plan to probably mid this month, sometime in the middle of this month, before the holiday break. And we had planned to be there, and probably still, I think we'll still, with the renovations going on, because we are working in there and cleaning the building out and doing some of the demolition already. So we'll probably on track to like the 3rd week of January to have it ready to be occupied. So that's where we are at this point. Any questions on the Goddard Center?
Dr. Cobbs, just to during our meeting, so a lot of the work is in-house. It's our craftsmen. It's going to be
It's all
in-house.
in-house, yes. All of it will be in-house, yes.
So that saves us money, keeping it all in-house.
Absolutely.
And the other thing is it also gives the community center a permanent place right now. So at least this is going to be their new home. And that way, we know North was a temporary situation. I think this way, as always, our superintendent and facilities are always stepping outside of the box. So finding them a permanent location, I think is going to help as well. That way they know that's where they're going to be, and then they can focus on building their community center over there, knowing that's what they have. So thank you. So that's going to start next week. That's going to start Monday.
Right. Like I said, we've already started. We're cleaning out the building. We had to move a lot of stuff that we had stored in there, and So that's just about done. So now we're pretty much entering the demolition phase, this week or next week. So
Thank you.
it should go pretty quickly. Again, there's nothing really structural going on. It's just, the cosmetic refreshing carpets and ceiling tiles and lights and light wall switches and, making sure the plumbing is working and maybe replace some plumbing fixtures if necessary. And then just making sure, the phone systems are up to date with a new system we've installed already throughout the district. We'll match that system. So.
Perfect. So then that would be available during the day and evenings, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Whereas the north was mostly evenings,
Right,
well,
exactly.
late afternoon into evening.
Don't
So
have
this
to
gives
worry
them,
about students or other staff, we'd have to work around. So you're right, it can be accessed any day.
perfect. Anyone have any questions? No, I know, Mr. Sullivan?
I had one. Yeah, this was for the superintendent. Mike, we were talking about you were gonna do some kind of pilot school there. Is that out of the question?
Yeah, the Promise School, which would be the one that's where Kelly Silver is working on with the Bar Foundation. That would be located there during the day. Again, that's if we get the grant from the Bar Foundation. This is the second year of the planning grant that we have. And so, yeah, that would be the plan. And again, that would help also with some funding to do some work at the building down the road. But the mayor has said that he would obviously look for funding this summer to do the elevator, so we could utilize the second floor and also the basement of the building. So he's still committed to doing that.
Sorry,
Glad
so
to
we
hear
won't
that.
need a kitchen.
No,
Sorry,
it's a satellite kitchen there.
yeah,
Where
so,
the meals are delivered from Brockton High School.
yeah, I remember when I toured that, we had toured a few schools, Mr. DiAgostino, myself, and superintendent. I'm not sure who else was there, but we toured a few of the schools, and that was one of them that day. And
Yep.
that was a sizable area. Believe it. The building is deceiving. It has a lot of room
Right.
that you don't really realize till you're in there and you see the offices and the space. So I think that's going to be it's going to be a good location for them to be able to have somewhere permanent. But thank you. So I think that was it for questions.
Okay. All right, I'll move on to the other business, which is a significant, I tried to shorten the kind of synopsis, of what the sequence of events that have happened there, but it's ongoing, and I get updates pretty much weekly from the engineers. And so as you can see, the natural gas, we had a natural gas event at the high school, which started November 10th. I got a call that they had to pull the fire alarm to evacuate the building because there was a heavy gas smell in the building. So the fire department went over there. When I got there, there was still, I walked down the main hallway by the administrative offices and I could smell gas. We were opening doors and to, empty out the smell of the building. And I met the fire department personnel and somebody from the gas company that, so we walked around and determined that it started upstairs in the north penthouse where the boilers are. And, there was a gas release, in fact, obviously in the building. So, it causes, this caused a kind of a cascade of events. Exactly what happened is a cascade of mechanical failures throughout the building, throughout the gas system that, we're still correcting at this point in time internally. So what we had to do was turn off the gas. The fire department came in. Next morning, I had the Department of Public Works, the city gas inspector, the state gas inspector, the fire department to come into the building to evaluate and assess the situation. And it was determined at that point in time, we had to turn off completely the gas to the building for safety concerns. And then we had to go through a series of, we found out what the problem was. There's main gas regulators that that come in. They were inside the building in the yellow building, and they call it was down in the pit where the main gas supply comes in on a 14-inch line. And these main regulators, they're 14, they're going to fit on the 14-inch line. What happened is they were plugged up and then blocked up in the open position, which caused inside the building, we have a gas pressure that's 14 inches, basically. It's 14 pounds typically. And the gas ahead of the regulator, it comes into the building off of the street at 75 pounds. So essentially what happened is we were getting 75 pounds of gas pressure into the building on a 14-pound system, which, if you remember what happened in Lawrence back a few years ago when the houses were overpressurized, so it's a potentially dangerous situation. Fortunately, nobody was hurt, nothing was damaged other than all the mechanical failures. So at this point, once the gas was shut down, then the inspectors came in, and all of a sudden they started requiring us to bring things further up to code, install isolation valves to cut off different areas of the building. And that was necessary, also to isolate the main gas line going to the heaters, the boilers in the building, so we could actually turn the gas back on eventually, isolate the rest of the parts of the system, and just, that's where we are right now. We're still operating under essentially the main line going to the boilers of both penthouses to supply heat to the buildings. Further, after all that, so we had to replace the main gas regulators. We had to install vents on the regulators so that if it overpressurized again, it would vent outside automatically. We've had to replace all of the regulators on all the boilers, all the gas valves on all the boilers. And at this time, we're still going through the building and replacing gas valves on all the kitchen equipment, all the heaters in the building, in every area where there's gas heaters or anything that has gas. We've had to replace the regulators and the gas valves to those units. And we're still cutting in isolation valves and test ports to test the pressure on the system before it can be repressurized, inspected and be repressurized. So my first question when I appeared at the building was, well, why does this happen? And, the representative, the associate from the gas company, he was walking around with the wands, checking the air. And he said, well, how old is the building? And how old are the boilers? It's like, well, they're old, but, they're 50 years old, but not everything typically goes at one time. There has to be a root cause of why this happened. So in further working with the engineer that, works with our boiler service company, it was determined again that the gas valve stayed open, the regulator stayed open, overpressurized the system and caused the failures. And the reason why it stayed open because as it happened, as you know, if you don't know, Eversource just took over. They bought the gas company here in the area, and they were working on their lines, doing their maintenance on the lines and whatever they do, which caused dirt and rust to blow into the lines into our system. And that's what caused the gas regulator to stay open in the open position. So because of that, again, since then, I walked through with the gas company. I met with Larry Rowley from Department of Public Works and over at City Hall. And when we went over to the high school to walk through, and as it turns out, well, they're wondering how this system was installed initially in the first place. It's kind of, quote, all wrong. It shouldn't have been engineered this way. It should have been engineered differently. The gas regulators should be outside of the building. There should have been filters installed. There should have been alarms installed. There should have been screens installed. So that's what's going to happen next. We're then Eversource is in the process of engineering the project to essentially replace the gas lines underground, install regulators, move them outside of the building, install filters, install what they call the dirt dumps. So if that happens again, it's dumped into bled off before it goes into the system, and warning alarms that will, and perhaps automatic shutdown valves if there's an overpressurization system again. So that's back at Eversource. I contacted Larry Rowley today, and he called the Eversource engineers. It's on the drawing board literally, and they're making up the designs and engineering specs to hopefully get in the ground sooner than later before the weather changes, to get the systems lines in the ground and upgraded.
So Dr. Cobb, who's covering the cost of this? Is it
Well,
Eversource that's picked?
That's a question, and that's something at some point, like I said, Larry Rowley, when he talked to the engineer, he said, this could cost up to like $250,000, and my response to that is, well, it needs to get done. And then we'll have to sort out, we'll sit down with whomever, if we have to get city legal involved to see what's what. So
I mean, it is a safety. It's definitely a
it's
safety
a safety
issue.
issue. We can't not do it. I mean, it has to get done, so, and at that point, we'll sit down and again, we've already, significant expense already for on our side, inside of the building to replace all these valves and on everything essentially. So it's quite an expense. So we, at this point, yeah, it costs consideration. Yes, indeed. But it has to get done, and sooner than later, we have to push them to get in the ground and out of the ground before the end of, this month, hopefully, or the end
Yeah,
of,
before the colder weather gets in,
Exactly.
definitely. Okay, Mr. Sullivan?
Dr.
Mr.
Cobb,
Sullivan?
is there heat in that building now?
Yes, there is. We have enough boilers back online. Essentially, each penthouse can run with 2 boilers online. Each boiler is 2 million BTU per hour output. So with 2 online, we could actually run the building, but we have just all the boilers back online in the penthouses now. So
Okay,
there is heat and hot water in the
Thank you.
building.
Now, I know we ran into this issue at Brockton High. Have we looked at our other schools to make sure we don't,
That's the
now
next
that we
step.
learned what happened at Brockton High, have we looked to just make sure our other schools, we're not gonna have this kind of an issue if there's something that we can visibly see
Exactly.
to try to avoid it?
That's the next step. Superintendent Thomas suggested that when I apprised him of what happened over there, so we have to go to the other buildings and install either regulators or isolation valves to do the same thing. So we will work with our contractor, industrial boiler systems once we get out of Brockton High School to assess the rest of the buildings.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on that? I think we are good.
Just one more, Joyce.
Oh, sure, Mrs. Sullivan.
Dr. Cobb, what about the stoves? Are they gas stoves up there?
Yes, they are. We installed isolation valves in the kitchen, and right now it's shut down because we have to go on each appliance and change the regulators or install regulators and new gas valves to each appliance. So right now the kitchen equipment is shut down, so it's not in use.
So where's
Are they doing the lunches someplace else?
that's what I was just gonna ask. So where's Chartwell's able to get the lunches ready?
Well, I believe that they don't actually have to cook the meals that, they're pre-packaged and pre-cooked. So the way that most of them are either frozen or pre-packaged, and they students take them home and reheat them in oven or microwave. So it's already prepared foods.
Okay,
All right, thank
good
you.
idea.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
That's it. All right, thank you, Dr. Cobbs, as always, for a very thorough presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so do we have any other business? Anything? I know there's a delay from Mr. Sullivan, so I'm just waiting a couple of seconds. Mr. Sullivan?
I'd a motion to adjourn.
Okay, so do we have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Sullivan?
Yes,
All right, can I get a second?
yes, motion to adjourn.
All right, Mr. Sullivan made a motion to adjourn. Mr. D'Agostino, are you going to second that? Because I don't think I can.
You can, but I'll second it. Why not?
Oh, okay, sure. And Mr. D'Agostino seconded that. Okay, it looks like we are good. Thank you, everybody. It was wonderful seeing everyone. Thank you for the updates. And as always, let me just check my, oh, sorry. Hold on 1 second. I believe I have to do a roll call to adjourn. Thank you. I was doing a roll call to adjourn. So, Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
roll call to adjourn. Yes. Mr. D'Agostino?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night.